1730 hours on April 4th, 2004, Sadr City of Baghdad, Iraq.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
1st Platoon, Charlie 25 Cav, was escorting a sewage truck in the southern part of the city.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
1755 hours as the sun began to set.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
3 large groups of men scattered to the north as the patrol approached.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Everyone in the patrol began to scan their sectors.
Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah.
The city of over 2 million people grew eerily quiet. And then, what started as sporadic gunfire quickly became overwhelming from all directions. Enemy forces across the city called to arms by the echoing calls of prayer, bouncing from one minaret to the next. This sparked a chain reaction that threw the 1st Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cav Division, headlong into the battle we now call Black Sunday. I am your host, Eddie Lazary, and on this series of episodes, I will be talking to the troops who were there and their families. We will be following and discussing The Long Road Home, a 7-part miniseries on the National Geographic Channel. If you or someone you know served during the Battle of Sard City, I want to talk to you. Join us over to our closed Facebook group 04-04-04. Now let's meet our next guest.
I was in Charlie Company, 2-5, 3rd Platoon. On that day, we were, as well as 1st Platoon, we were...
This is Specialist Rafael Riera. Like 1st Platoon, he too found himself rolling around Sadr City, escorting a waste removal vehicle, or what we called a shit truck.
And visiting a couple of IP stations, and we had Humvees. Unlike them, we actually had pretty much all of them up armored. And I was just a driver that day for one of the Humvees. I believe I was either 2nd or 3rd in a 4-vehicle convoy, pretty much when we went throughout the city. And we had just gotten back to the FOB when we heard that everything started going down.
So someone would say there's enough raw sewage on the street to have 2 convoys rolling around a city with suck-a-butt trucks. What would you say to that?
I'd say not 2, maybe 20 would be more accurate of what was necessary to clean up the entirety of Sadr City.
And I know they did a really good job. I actually spoke with some guys that were on set there of the Long Road Home on Fort Hood, and they recreated everything up to and including
up to the smell. The smell wasn't there.
Right, the smell wasn't there, but they did have fake raw sewage. I don't know how do you make fake raw sewage?
Well, they added this. When I walked through the set, it was shortly after the 4th reunion. They're over at 4th ID over here on Hood. We actually had to do it on the 4th ID side because first cab was under construction. They were using like this green like glue, as well as like a sort of a gelatin type of stuff, and just water just sitting there. And they built like these little mini dams, and then they just built trash piles around those little mini dams that they had, and then it was just made it look as authentic as possible. Obviously, they couldn't do it 100% accuracy, because in reality, the real place was more like 4 streets, 4 lanes wide.
Yeah.
Versus the show is just like 1 or 2 lanes at the most.
Yeah, and I can only imagine, as well as I do, how EPA is treated on Fort Hood, and the whole drip pans, and like they actually let people spill garbage and all that out, and I asked somebody why they didn't leave the mount site all dressed up like Sadr City, and they said it was because, one, they weren't actual solid structures; they were just kind of
they weren't
faces.
It was wood and like a lot of plaster.
Yeah. And the other reason was because it just wouldn't pass any EPA standards that we have on Fort Hood, which, I won't tell that story, not on air. I'll tell you off air, but I got a funny EPA story on Fort Hood from back in the day. But we were out doing a field problem one time, and shit got bad. But anyway.
Nah, never. Not on Fort Hood.
No, never. So there you were, escorting a sucker-butt truck around. Now, did you get a sense... Now, obviously, we were only in country for a week, or depending on, because everybody kind of rolled in at different times, right? But
yeah, we were actually including the time down in Kuwait before we actually drove up, because I was part of the convoy of Hammets and Hets that had to be actually had the Bradleys on the back of that, then rolled into the city, and then from there drove the Bradleys and stuff onto the fob, because I was originally just going to be, just a Bradley driver and a jump gunner for one of the Bradleys. And then I eventually turned into a gunner later on down the road. But yeah, we were there. I think it was like the 4th official day of us being there to take over. And then we had literally just been only like 3 or 4 days, but we had actually been in country, including Kuwait, maybe a week and a half.
Yeah. Now, when you convoyed up, did they? I also enjoyed the 3-day convoy into Baghdad. Did they also hand you cases of Gatorade and say, "Here you go, but keep the bottles"?
No. I already had all my pokey baits set up for the drive up and stuff like that, so I was already squared away for that kind of stuff. They didn't hand us really anything. We only stopped really once that I remember, or twice. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was the weirdest thing to be on top of a Bradley, having a 25 mic and a coax available to you, and you have to pull security out of the top of the Bradley with the M16 because you're not allowed to engage the turret at all. So it was weird,
crazy.
It was weird.
Yeah, I bet. And then you get there, and that's the other thing too. A lot of people don't realize is we left a good chunk of our armor back to Fort Hood, our Bradleys and our tanks. And so now you got soldiers that are literally trained their entire careers in Bradleys and tanks, rolling around in Humvees, right? I mean, the dynamics of a tank crew. Now, I don't know if you know many tank crews, but I'll tell you, they hate touching their feet on solid ground, right? They will literally
death before dismount.
They will do everything from the decks of their tank. And so here they are, expected to actually drive a measly Humvee around and get out on occasion. They were good sports about it, but I just couldn't imagine. I mean, here's the thing. Very few of us from 1st Brigade went into our deployment doing what we were actually MOS trained to do, right?
Correct.
And then we're handed all these jobs and tasks to do that, quite frankly, we didn't really have any experience doing. I mean, obviously, escorting a sucker-butt truck, I mean, security is security, but, I mean, if you're talking infantry tactics, escorting a sucker-butt truck isn't in the FM anywhere, as far as I can gather.
There's no field manual for that. No. Definitely not.
And one of the things I loved the most was when we were told, just keep an eye out for anything that looks out of place or anything that looks, that looks out of the ordinary or doesn't look,
AKA everything.
doesn't look normal. I'm like, I just stopped the car and popped the trunk of the car and there was a live goat in it. Like, that's weird to me. Like, that's not normal, but over there, that's normal, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the weirdest thing. Well, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff, but one of the stuff that I always remember is actually looking like a long time after the fourth. I remember looking through the IBAS of the Bradley scanning my sector, and I see a dog pick up a horse leg and then run off with it. And I'm just like, that was always the trippiest the thing that I always remember no matter what.
Now, a horse leg. How did the horse come to be without a leg?
C-130 kind of blew it up by accident.
By accident.
It was on Route Silver at the time.
Yeah.
We had expected a lot of IEDs on Route Silver, so a C-130 came in and just 30 millimetered the entire road all the way down, blowing up every single IED that was on it. And one of the horses was already like either already dead or obviously dead after the thing shot up, but it shot into different pieces, and then you see a dog just random scraggly dog picking up an entire horse leg and just running off with it. And I was just like,
there's nothing.
That was trippy.
There's nothing more spectacular than a C-130 Hercules flying over, just laying waste to everything. That's awesome. Hoping
no more IEDs on Route Silver after that.
Yeah. Hoping like hell your reflective shit that you have is working, right?
Yep.
So
which kind of tripped me out about the episode last night.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
But it tripped me out that the VF-17 panel wasn't as pronounced to them as as advertised to us how effective it is for them to see it from higher up. Because we've had multiple gunships, up in the air. And one thing that I kind of realized that I don't understand why they didn't do is they all had PAC-4s on all their weapons.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
All they had to do is shoot lasers up into the air, and then they would have seen it with their infrared. But, I mean, that's just me.
Yeah.
I was literally sitting there yelling at the screen as they were trying to figure out how to notify the helicopter where they were. And I was going like, tracer rounds. One guy said he has nothing but tracer rounds left, and they decided to make a big fire on the top. Which something I actually had never realized before, because I remember a picture of Hayhurst, and then I see him, then he doesn't have a top on. All he has is a brown T-shirt on and like no sleeves on, nothing like that. And I never realized exactly what had happened to bring him to that point.
Right.
Now realizing that they ripped off all their sleeves and their BDU tops, your DCU tops, so they can use that as kindling to create a fire on the roof. I never even knew that.
Now, is that worth breaking regs to start a fire to signal somebody to come save your ass? I don't know if that's
because you got little birds flying over, and they need to identify you versus the enemy. I will freaking strip butt ass naked and freaking wear freaking reflective whatever it takes for them to notify exactly where I'm at, and so they can shoot at the enemy.
Hell yeah,
I'll do whatever it takes.
Hell yeah, man. So
a little bit of the SOP goes right out the window when shit hits the fan.
Yes, it does. That's for sure. There's a lot of shit that happened over there that wasn't covered in any manuals that I read. That's for sure.
Oh, heck no.
One of the things we first got there, I was part of the BRT, and we thought it was a good idea to take off all of our Humvee doors. so yeah, we were rolling around that night with no Humvee doors, and we realized quickly that was a bad idea.
Oh yeah, a week later, everybody's trying to find pieces of metal to just randomly weld onto them. So yeah, definitely not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but it got cold that night. It was hot. It was pretty warm in the day. But
I with everything going on, I don't even remember the temperature really.
Well, trust me, it was cold that night.
Well, no, trust me. After everything got done, we ended up at an IP station, and I ended up out in one of the Humvees pulling radio guard while everybody else was securing everything inside the IP station that we took over. And I still don't remember if it was cold or not. I guess my adrenaline was just a little bit running a little bit too much still.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of this. A lot of guys were kind of tasked with retaking IP stations throughout Sadr City. Now, When we say the words take over, was it because there was nobody there, or were they
Correct.
all the police that were there, all the IPs that were there, they just kind of
Well,
fled, or what happened?
Well, it's a mixture of multiple things. On that actual day, as they actually did point out in the show, some of the enemies were actually dressed in IP uniforms and shooting at the tanks, as they
Yeah.
actually portrayed it in the show. Which same thing happened to us on Route Delta. There was occasions where Elliot and a couple other people actually shot IPs because the IPs were shooting at us. And when we took over the police stations, it was just our ways to set up sort of, hard points throughout the city where we could actually do like a mini quick reaction force from that area in any direction, especially with all the heavy content that we had the previous day, at least for the following week. We just used those as, as hasty freaking positions where we can just move from in case anything went down anywhere else.
Yeah, and other than the fact that those IP stations were infantry blue, everywhere.
Yeah.
the walls, the doors, the everything, infantry blue.
Yeah,
all
everything
around.
was blue.
They did have probably some of the best fortifications as far as fortifications go in that area.
Oh yeah.
So it's definitely, like you said, it's kind of a hasty strong point where you can kind of gain some footing in some of the strategic areas. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I know the IP station where we were at took multiple RPG hits and pipe bombs that they were trying to shoot at us and shooting at us throughout the following week after the 4th. So I mean, they were definitely built strong.
So the first time you encountered an actual real life, i.e., RPG, were you surprised at the speed that those things traveled versus what you were used to seeing in war movies?
Oh yeah,
I am. I was.
I was the one it might not have been my first one, but it was the one I remember the most. It was sometime after we were first there. We were doing a cordon and search on a sector of the city, and I remember it was we had definitely changed up from the 4 Humvee convoys to 2 Bradleys and 2 Humvees, 1 Bradley in the front, 1 Bradley in the rear, with 2 Humvees in between. And I think, without a doubt, the stupidest thing that ever came out of my mouth, and yet to this day still the funniest and most vivid in my mind, is Bradley's in front of me, I'm the Humvee right behind it, and we're driving down towards the area that we're gonna go a cordon search on, and all I see is this flash of light pass in front of me, almost like it's in slow motion. It's not really that fast. It's fast. It's not like you can't follow or anything like that, but it goes right behind the Bradley, right in front of my vehicle, and then out loud, without even a hesitation, I go like, "What the heck is that?" And sure enough, it explodes like shortly after it passes past the Bradley, and it was a freaking RPG that just had flown by, and it was just, I started kicking myself in the ass later on, going like, "What? How could I not know what that was after getting shot at by them so many times?" I'm literally driving a Humvee, going like, "What the heck is that?" Just flying by, and it looked like a Roman candle on fire or something, just flying by or some shit.
And that's the thing is, you're getting shot at, but when it turns real, you still like ask yourself like, did that just hit? Did that just? Are they really trying to kill me? Like,
Yeah,
is this
that
really
was literally
happening?
our first reaction on the 4th. We had just turned on Route Delta, and I remember Elliot was in the turret. He had the 240 Bravo, and all of a sudden we're just driving down the road, nothing's going on, and all of a sudden he just starts opening up, and literally all 4 of us, all of us inside the Humvee, we yell up and, "Elliot, what are you doing, man? What the heck are you doing?" And then all of a sudden, ping, 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 like from every single direction you can even think of. He had already spotted them and started opening fire on them before we even realized what was going on inside the Humvee. So it was definitely a little bit of a shell shock, that's for sure.
And it's so crazy because we spend so much time training. We go to NTC, we go out to the field, we go to the range, we do all these things to prepare for it. Then you get out there and you're in the shit for real, and it's just like, it's surreal. You know what I mean?
Is this really happening?
Yeah, I remember I was on station on Iron Horse the whole year, and so we got the Iron Horse, and we got our vehicles in our makeshift motor pool, whatever you want to call it, our little fenced-in area where we kept our Humvees. And so we got there. We were getting ready to do some right seat, left seat rides with the outgoing unit and all that. And out come the ammo cans, and they're like, "Here you go. Fill up your mags." And I just remember, and I was a staff sergeant at the time, so I had 9 years in the Army at that time. So many NTC rotations, field problems, ranges, all that, right? And we crack open the ammo can. And I just remember thinking to myself how weird it felt putting live ammo into our magazines and putting our full magazines into our pouches, right? It's like it just felt so freaking different. It felt weird, to be doing that and not be like at a range or something, or to not have
Well, at least you had the ammo cans. I found myself after we went through all that shit. We found ourselves back at the DAC. I'm sitting there right inside the entrance, filling up empty magazines because just about everybody was black on ammo.
Yeah.
From Ziploc bags.
Ziploc bags of ammo.
Yeah, the unit, the people from Second ACR or whoever it was that we replaced had come and give us some new Humvee tires because almost all the tires in our Humvees were shot out. And a new replacement Humvee because one of them, the whole transmission fell out of it from the pipe bombs. They brought us ammo so we could reload our magazines. So I'm sitting there with like 30, 40, 50 mags around me, and I'm sitting, and they just hand me these 2 or 3 gallon size Ziploc bags full of 5.56, and I'm just sitting there on the ground going like filling magazines. And oddly enough, shortly after that happened, some guy rolls up to me and he starts to call me by my name, and I'm all still frustrated and I'm still pissed off about what's going on, and we couldn't find them, and we're still just recollecting. I'm sitting there just filling all these damn magazines, and I go like, what do you want? And I look up. I don't even remember his name anymore, but he was one of the guys I went to basic training with that was there from second ACR.
Really?
One of the units that we were replacing, he was like, "What's up, man?" I was like, "Oh shit!" I stand up, hug him, like, "What's up, dude? Oh, you're in the shit too? Oh yeah." We were both specialists at that point. Oh, I guess we're both on track. That's awesome. Yeah, blah blah blah. All right, I gotta go back to film mags. And I just sit back down. Like I keep putting ammo in the magazines. I gotta have ammo.
It's kind of a crazy class reunion, middle of
Oh yeah, middle of the shit. Just, hey, what's up, dude? I was like,
wow.
Oh shit, what the hell?
Oh my God! I don't know what would be worse. Our unit being just got there basically, or those guys just about to leave. I have to imagine it would be them guys just about to leave, because that would just
especially after them saying that they hadn't had anything happen in over a year.
Yeah.
To them literally just a day or two away from packing up all our stuff and then being gone for God, till next time around, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be definitely just weird. That's for sure.
There's no way that was a spur of the moment ambush, right? That took some planning, man. That took some time. The way they put the obstacles throughout Sadr City to funnel all the traffic to go exactly where they wanted and have all their positions. And a lot of how they do it. The Iraqis, it's very rare that you ever see bad guys wandering around with weapons, right? They're wandering around without weapons, and they're going from one cache to the next. They go from one spot where they've got RPGs or AK-47s, whatever they got.
No, they were definitely coordinated.
Yeah, and that's how they do it. And it's like you can't plan that. That's not a spur of the moment thing. That was definitely kind of a thought out. Now that brings me to my next question. On April 4th that day, I understand that we were relatively new. We didn't quite grasp all of the nuances and intricacies of the different cultures and everything. We're kind of throwing into almost a different world, almost, right? And it's the only way I can describe it. It's totally different, just everything. And but did you get a sense that something was off that day?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier on in the day, we had actually set up a checkpoint to just inspect vehicles and stuff like that. I can't remember what side of the city it was on, but I actually wrote this down because I was requested to sort of write down my experiences down because I know National Geographic wants to add in as much background information, additional information as possible for like the websites or stuff like that. So I actually sat down and wrote some stuff down, and that made me remember there was while we were at that vehicle checkpoint, there was a truck that drove by with a whole bunch of Mookie supporters and wearing those had those green bandanas on their arms, and then one dude freaking swinging a katana at us in our general direction as they drove by, and then you had the previous demonstrations and the parades the day before, where they will, the whole street was just lined with them in actual formation, them, road marching in formation down the freaking street with were dressed in black with their green bandanas on their arms and stuff like that. So it definitely felt like something was going to happen that day. And then when something didn't happen after the demonstration, the following day with the whole katana incident, you could feel like something was going to happen. And when we were actually surprised when we got back to FOB and nothing had happened, and then we heard about First Platoon. So obviously we just got right back into the vehicle and just rolled out, which is something that was left out of the show. But I mean, they had to do constrictions based off time and stuff like that, but they don't even talk about Blue Platoon at all in the TV show.
Yeah, there was and that's the thing too is that I picked up that was kind of off from the show is there were so many QRFs that were rolling out, and they were all made up of different configurations, different vehicle types, different units. They were mixed units that were going out.
Mixed platoons.
Yeah, I mean there was. Well, I was attached to the BRT, but my parent unit was 1st Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery, and so I knew like Sheehan and Justice. I knew those guys. And so you got you've got cooks and you've got mechanics and you've got all different types of crazy MOSs. Everybody was a rifleman that day, and everybody. I mean, it had nothing to do with the unit, the platoon, the company you were part of. Literally, everybody just. And I've said that before on these other episodes that I've interviewed people with. That was the one day where you never saw anyone standing around looking for something to do. You know what I mean? Like everybody in the whole, and that's the thing that's kind of misleading in a way. The Long Run Home series, you're really only looking at, a couple of platoons and from a company's perspective, but the entire brigade was involved with that. On all three FOBs, there was things going on all over the place. Everyone was involved somehow. And it lasted, obviously that night and the next day. But
you got to remember that if they for the TV show, if they included everybody and everything that was happening in that area all day, I mean, this would be like a year-long,
for sure,
series going on because of so much that actually happened in those. Heck, in just those first couple of days, for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I mean, how many people? There's about 4,000 or 5,000 people in a brigade, right? Give or take. With all of the companies, all of the battalions involved, right? So you got 3 FOBs, about 4,000 or 5,000 people. Everybody was involved. Everyone got sucked in, and that doesn't even count the outgoing units. Right?
Outgoing, yeah. The tankers.
Yeah, there was a ton of people involved with this, man, and it just kind of gives you some. And we were terribly outnumbered, right? So
it was something. It was something that their forces numbered somewhere. Now we heard this maybe like a week or two after the fact, but they had over 2,000 plus attacking 19 people,
right?
And then attacking the following 19 or 20 people that came from when White rolled out, and then when Valesky rolled out. And he got attacked. I mean, it was citywide. It wasn't just around Delta because they were setting up places on Bravo, on Charlie, on Arrows, Silver. I mean, it was the entire city. And later on that night, it even proved it as much because when they attacked us again later on the next day, you knew it was coordinated because they actually used colored flares to coordinate their attacks. They had red, they had white, they had green, they had flares popping up, and we actually caught onto it, which reminded me about this moment where Sard actually caught onto the pattern, and I think it was the second or third night they saw the green flare pop up, and usually the nights before when the green flare would go up, they start attacking us from all different sides. I mean, RPGs, pipe bombs, AK fire from every single direction you can think of. And he had caught on to it to the point where as soon as he saw the red flare, we had our own flare. So he popped. Yeah, when he saw the green flare, he popped one of our red flares almost simultaneously. As soon as that red flare went up, nothing happened.
So
right after the green one. So they actually prevented them from shooting at us.
Because you were confusing the communication.
Correct.
Yeah.
We confused their communication with our own flares.
Right.
And that was all Sard.
Wow.
And that was at our IP station. So they were definitely coordinated.
And the other thing, too, is I know that they were there were several minarets, mosques and minarets throughout the city. And I just remember that night in particular and the following days after that. Obviously you get used to the evening prayer and the morning prayer and all that. But they were doing, you could hear the sound of prayer going off in weird increments. And so we figured that they were using the minarets and the loudspeakers of the minarets to communicate from one minaret to the next and basically spread messages. And that's how they were communicating in mass throughout the entire city. So that was another form of communication. So, to say that this was just a spur of the moment ambush that was just kind of brought on by circumstance, I think is absolutely false. It was clearly a very planned and orchestrated attack, and I don't know if 444 is any significance in that particular day in terms of when they started all of this, or if that was just coincidence. But I
believe they just tried to do it since we had just taken over.
I think so too.
They tried to test and prod the new unit coming in before we had a time to settle in and just attack us as soon as possible, and that's why it just happened to be that day.
I mean, if anyone that's ever read The Art of War, that's a classic offensive tactic, is to strike when your enemy is weakest, and that's obviously a very vulnerable time for any military unit of any size, is at a point of transition, especially an incoming unit that just got there, and there's the confusion with you got one element tearing down their communications, and the new unit's trying to set up communications, and we're all new. We have no idea what the hell's going on. And I think that's the one thing too. If I had a time machine and I was given, general stars, and I was able to make, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking right now, but if I was able to go back, I think, knowing what we know today, obviously we didn't know then what we know today. But I think if we would, so over the course of the last decade or more, we've been rotating units out and serving, 12-month, 18-month deployments, and then redeploying as a unit, and then the new unit comes in. And to me, I think you lose a lot of footing, a lot of ground by doing it that way, because you learn things throughout your deployment, and then when you leave and that new incoming unit comes in, it gives the bad guys the opportunity to basically recycle all of their old tricks, because the incoming unit are unaware of them. And I think if we had if we had maybe a rotation where you had a set unit in a particular place and you rotated people individually, kind of like Korea, right? You got the units that exist in Korea, and you're just rotating people in and out. That way you sustain some. Any of those relationships that you've built with, sheikhs or other individuals within those communities, you can sustain those relationships,
Yeah, but in that kind of a situation, though, you can't put that sort of a stress on people like that for extended periods of time like that. Yeah. So, I mean, the rotation it has to happen. I mean, look how many people got burnt out from just going for multiple deployments, much less staying there for 13, 14 months or staying there for 2 years would overkill.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely see that too. Because, I mean, at the end of our 12 months, dude, we were spent, bro. I mean, we were done. We were out. Yeah. We were out doing patrols, clearing Route Pluto.
Waiting waiting for that Black Hawk to come in and pick us up and get us the heck out of there.
Yeah, man. That was the sweetest ride too. Is flying out of the fob over to buy up and getting the hell out of there, man. It was surreal. But
then chilling at Camp New York for like a week or so,
yeah,
getting ready to come back.
God. So I mean, what did you think about this series when you heard it? Obviously, I'm assuming you probably were aware of the book long before the series, right? I think anybody that served over there knew of Martha's book and probably picked it up, read it. At least everybody that I know had. I did for sure. And then I heard that the series was coming out, and I was like, I was excited on one hand, but on the other hand, I was like, oh man, I know it's been 13 years, but man, I don't know if I'm even going to be ready for this. You know what I mean? What was your thoughts when you found out that it was coming out?
Well, I wasn't ready for it either. I was scared of what it would bring out and what it would do to me. And a lot of the episodes so far, I've already, unfortunately, have been crying a couple times because of it, because of everything going on with it, and it's just part of the healing process. But being actually on set and being part of the show, whether they filmed here on Fort Hood, was even more impactful on everything going on in my head than the show could ever do. The simple fact of going over to the Ladger Mount site and actually seeing them building the set and realizing how close we really were to finding them that night when we drove past their location without even knowing, because we didn't have a grid coordinate to where they were at, and they were telling us that they turned right down an alleyway. In reality, based off the direction that we were traveling, it was left. We were looking in the whole wrong direction, and to actually know that we were that close to finding them in the middle of the day versus at night when they actually got exfilled, it was so impactful and such a healing process for me that I never realized that it was actually going to benefit me as much as it hurt me at the same time. It's sort of like a double-edged sword, but one side is painful and the other side is healing all at the same time. It was definitely a unique experience, and I'm glad that they did the show right, especially for those loved ones that see their loved ones represented on the screen, those who aren't with us anymore, that are able to actually maybe get a small amount of closure, and knowing that. And having the reassurance that they aren't forgotten, and they never will be. It's just something reassuring and wonderful about that fact, and that's something that this show has been able to give those people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously anybody that served in the military we've all seen, Platoon and Hamburger Hill and all these, Band of Brothers, Pacific. We've seen all of them, right? I'm sure you're in the same boat. Watching this series though is different. One, because it's our story. Two, because we were there. And three, it's because the story of people that we knew and that we cared about and that we lost that night, right? I mean,
yeah.
And
there was a moment.
Yeah.
There was a moment where we were on the parade field over the 4th ID, where we actually saw Kenny Lou dressed in Sergeant Chen's uniform there, and they were shooting a part of for the show. It literally blew all of our minds. They had to stop filming because, I mean, for Sergeant Carson, myself, and then like 2 or 3 other guys, we literally rolled up straight to him and were just like, because he was wearing that uniform and it said Chen on it, and then he was the guy portraying him. We literally flipped out when we saw him there. It's just a moment of surrealism to actually have them portraying people we knew, and all the actors, and there were the guy playing Colonel Valesky and Berkwin and Guzman, and that was the trippiest part. I went to dinner because Guzman lives down in San Antonio, Doc Guz, and be able to actually drive down to Pluckers here down at Fort Hood and have Guzman sitting across from the actor Guzman, had drinking a beer, having a couple of wings and some fries and stuff like that, and actually being able to be part of that interaction, and how much dedication they actually gave, and how much effort they actually gave into trying to get this show 100% right is just awesome.
Can you imagine? I mean, it's one thing to be an actor and play the part of some World War II person that's been long dead and gone, right? But to be an actor, and I'm trying to put myself in their shoes, right? To be an actor, a young actor, 20s, early 30s, whatever the case may be, playing not even characters, they're real people, and some of them lost their lives, and be in and around guys that served with those guys. I mean, that must have been a tall order to ask those actors to fill, and I think they all did an amazing job with it.
Most definitely. I mean, and they were just so humble about it, and they were just so proud of the fact that they were able to bring this to the public, and to actually be able to do something so honorable towards the people that, you know, did give that ultimate sacrifice. That it's nicest people in the world you could ever meet.
Yeah,
every single last one of them.
So far we've got next week, I think, is the last episode, right? And then they got like a follow-up part of the series where they do like a behind-the-scenes kind of thing. I think that's going to be equally as cool to watch. But so far in the series that we've seen, what's been the most standout scene or moment so far of the series for you?
Other than seeing myself in the background as an extra?
Yes.
Stand out. I think that the thing that what stood out the most to me was the simple fact that there was so much that I didn't know, and so much that I learned 13 years after the fact.
Yeah.
13 years later, and I'm learning new things about that day. That because I was, you know, because everybody is always in their own little bubble,
right.
Especially when you're in a combat environment and you're going through stuff, you're in your own little bubble, fighting and doing everything, so everything else sort of melts away. Up until it took me 13 years almost to find out that Captain Denemy got shot.
Mm.
I didn't even know that.
Right.
I didn't even know that he had gotten shot. I didn't even know that Colonel Vlesi's driver died. I didn't know any of this. 13 years later, there's still so much from that day that you're actually learning on a day-to-day basis. It's just so overwhelming and astonishing. And just even like I said, like the picture of Hayhurst when he lost a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 13 years later, I know why.
Right.
You know, it's not much that it's just a show and the people are portraying us and stuff like that. It's the simple fact that even from this process, I'm still learning things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and I think that's what's so cool, though, is, I mean, we all fought essentially. We fought in the same battle space, in the same battle, but we all were seeing it from our own foxhole,
different perspectives.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
And so I knew
everything's.
Yeah,
everybody's perspective was different.
Exactly, and I knew what my role was. I knew what I did and how I was involved, and what my section and team and troop did, and all of that. You know, we were tasked with escorting the casualties from Eagle down to Cuervo, and then bring ammunition and medical supplies back up to Eagle, and that's kind of it's basically what my section found ourselves doing that entire night into the next day, and in the entire time we could hear the angry gunfire happening in Sadr City, you know, as we were going down arrows, you know what I mean? So we knew that we heard that the platoon was pinned down. We knew that QRFs were getting ambushed and taking casualties, and they were coming back and they were sending more people out. Like, we knew that, but like in terms of the how and the why and the where and the who, like, you're right, man. 13 years later, I'm watching this series, and it's the first time I'm like, oh, I had no idea, like, where everybody was and what everybody was doing and how.
Yeah.
And I understand that there's some limitations to what they're able to portray in the series, but at least it brought a little bit more of a little bit more of clarity to me in terms of
Yep.
what else was going on at the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, the same thing happened to me. You remember on the episodes where they actually had the Iraqis actually took the Humvees and set them on fire.
Mm-hmm.
13 years later, I realized we drove through that exact spot because I remember driving through the wall of fire twice.
Mm-hmm.
We had actually driven by that point twice looking for them, and we still couldn't find them because they were down the alleyway in the wrong direction that we were looking. And they actually did the screening here on Fort Hood for the first and second episode just before it was like a week or two before it was about to release on TV. And it to realize we were that close, and then to find out from Fisk himself, he actually came and stepped by because we were I was a little upset, as well as some other people from Blue Platoon were a little upset because our portrayal and our part in all of it was cut out, because and there's a lot of sections where they discuss how Comanche White and Warrior Blue and the tankers were the only people going out there searching for them, when in reality, before anybody else rolled out, before the tankers rolled out, before Captain Denby and his crew rolled out, and before the freaking Colonel Valesky rolled out, Comanche Blue was already on their way looking for them, and we actually driven by their location on multiple occasions. And none of that was portrayed. And then when Fisk, could see that in me, he actually came over and told us and made me realize that if it wasn't for the simple fact that we drove by, the enemy would have continued to fire at them.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we drove by their actual location, we drove through that wall of fire of their burning Humvees, because when they were burning, it didn't even look like a Humvee. Everything was happening so fast you couldn't even tell what it was that was burning in front of you. We were just driving through.
Mm-hmm.
He actually let us know that because we drove by, it actually drew all the enemy's fire over to the Route Delta where we were at, and they started shooting at us instead, which gave them a moment to take a breather. It gave them that moment to, okay, let's regroup. How's ammo doing? What's going on? And situate themselves to be able to continue to go out through the rest of the day and for the rest of the night, through the rest of the firefights. And then when we drove back down Route Delta again, because we turned around just kind of like they did, and we drove back down Route Delta looking for them again, it once again drew the fire away from them, and they fired at us instead. And this is all happening before anybody else was even in the city, dispatched to come get them.
Right.
And that simple fact that we didn't find them, granted, but we helped them by drawing fire away from them, just that small amount made everything better in both emotionally for me and mostly just emotionally for me, because I mean it just I literally broke down, and I couldn't do anything for like almost 2 days once I found out that we were really that close to finding them and we weren't able to. I had a lot of guilt inside, and we always felt bad at the simple fact that what if we could. I mean, I know personally for me, I wish, what if we could have gotten there sooner? Would people have taken less injuries? Would things have been different if we would have found them right away? Maybe that LNTV never would have gotten rolled out, and maybe Young wouldn't have got paralyzed, and maybe Arciaga wouldn't. It's always the subject of what if, and the simple fact that we were able to draw fires away from them helped me so much that it's astounding that I don't know, I'm speechless now right now, sorry.
No, man, it's good, and I totally understand. I battle every day with that motherfucker called What If,
Yeah.
I lost 2 guys over there, and a bunch of other guys get wounded, and 13 years later, I'm still playing the, what if we'd rolled out a little bit later? What if we had seen that instead of that? What if I wasn't the lead truck? What if, and that little motherfucker just will sit on your shoulder and just scream in your
Yep.
ear for as long as you let it. And not that it will ever go away, but man, if you don't,
Just got to deal with it.
yeah, if you don't put him in check, man, it can destroy you. And I think, I think Fisk gave you the gift of knowing that, your contribution that day, was huge in that it not only gave them a reprieve, but it allowed them to conserve ammunition that they were going to need later that night. It
Yep.
allowed them to maybe even reposition their own positions, or to build up some additional defenses on the rooftop, or even go out and give the LT a chance to hop on the radio for communication. You never know. I mean, those little things that if you hadn't have driven by and drawn that fire away, you know what I mean?
It was definitely eye opening.
Yeah. Well, man. All in all, do you think this series? I know it's a two-edged sword, and sometimes the path to healing is built on a road of pain, unfortunately. But that's the reality of it,
Yeah, most definitely. It's a lot of people are going to take it different ways. Some people are going to take nothing from it, and a lot of other people are also going to heal even if they just healed the smallest bit from this. It was worth it in 10 times over. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's just a fraction of healing. That fraction of healing will build on top of another fraction on top of another fraction until eventually people will be able to cope with things a little bit better. So, I mean, this show is whether people benefit from it or not, as long as it benefits just one person, it's definitely worth it, and I'm glad it was done.
Yeah, man. Totally agree. Well, brother, thanks for coming on the show, sharing your story, and
yeah, of course.
it's great meeting you, and I'm glad you're part of our 444 group. That's turned into something completely unexpected, to be honest with you. I didn't know what to expect, and I threw it together. But I'll tell you, the reason why I started that group is because the series was releasing whether I was ready for it or not, and I didn't know if I didn't know if I was ready for it. I didn't think I was.
Yeah.
And so I decided to just stand up and face it. And I said, well, if I'm going to stand and face this bitch, I don't want to do it alone. So I created.
Hey, everybody needs that support
You know what I
network,
mean?
man.
So I created.
That's the one
yeah.
thing I love about Facebook. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not a big Facebook guy. I don't post a lot. I don't like a lot of stuff. I don't share a lot of stuff. But if the one thing and one thing only I take away from this entire social media experience is the fact that it has allowed so many people in so many different locations throughout the world. It allowed us to reconnect back to the group that we were before, and it allows us to be able to communicate with each other and still reach out to people for help whenever it's needed.
Yeah, man.
It's so beneficial.
And one of the things, just last night, as a matter of fact, I was a part of a tragic accident that happened on Route Pluto northbound when an LMTV smashed into the end of some Jersey berries, and the LMTV flipped over and it pinned down the guy, and it was. And my section was I didn't know him. I didn't know the unit. I didn't know the guy.
That was our platoon. That was our company.
Yeah. And last night,
that was Sergeant Lay driving that's Sergeant Lay driving the LMTV, and it was Hendrickson who was pinned by the LMTV.
And for 13 years, man, that plays in my mind every single day. And for 13 years. I was so angry because I didn't know the name of the guy. I didn't know his name. I knew Colonel Valesky ended up showing up as Humvee, and we by that time we had Hendrickson loaded up in my Humvee. We were about to transport him, and Colonel Valesky said, "No, I'm taking my own guy." And so we moved him in the Colonel Valesky's Humvee, and they drove away, and then never saw him before, and never talked to anybody from that unit again. And for 13 years, it just ate at me that I was there, and
so you were actually there.
Yeah, I was there, and I didn't know his name. And
is it true that as they were lifting it off of him, the chain snapped and it fell back on him?
Yeah. So yeah, he was the like he was halfway out, like the door.
Yeah.
It was pinned, like the door was pinned,
Yeah.
pinned him between the door and the frame of the cab. And they had an 88 there that they had hooked up a chain on something on the back of the cab. And they started to pull it up. And as they pulled the cab up, obviously the door stayed on the ground. But the cab lifted, and it allowed the door to kind of go at more of a slanted angle. And so he was able to kind of slide down off of the door, more onto the ground. And I actually got, I set my M4 down, and I was actually working on actually going to go underneath the cab and try to grab his legs and pull him out. And I almost started underneath the cab of the LMTV when it broke free. So I was literally inches away from being underneath that cab when it fell again.
Brother, just like you said a moment ago, what if?
I know.
It'll haunt you it'll haunt us, all of us, for the rest of our lives. But we can't live that way.
I know. And that's the thing and I found out later, I don't know, a couple of days later, that he didn't make it. And for 13 years, it ate me up inside that I never knew his name. And then last night in the group, in the 444 group, somebody had commented that his son had died in an LMTV accident, and it clicked with me. And I sent him a direct message. It was David Hendrickson, his dad. Yeah. And I said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did your son die? Because I had my suspicions, but I wasn't sure. And he shared with me what he knew of the accident, and I was like, oh man, I was there for that. And so he and I basically chatted back and forth on Facebook Messenger till 1 a.m. last night, sharing stories. And
he's a good dude.
Yeah, man.
He's a good. He comes to all the get-togethers that he can.
Yeah.
Because he lives in the area. And he was actually at some of the screenings and stuff like that, and he was there for part of the filming stuff too. So I mean,
yeah. And he told me that they were able to get at the end, I think it's the last episode, in the aid station there, they got somebody in there that's wearing the Hendrickson uniform to portray Hendrickson, because he was a big part of helping casualties at the aid station on 444. So, which is really cool that they got him to be a part of that. So,
thanks for making me cry. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. I'm just happy to finally, 13 years later, know his name, Rob Hendrickson. I know I'll never forget him.
He was a short, stubby little motherfucker, but he was a cool ass dude.
Yeah, his dad said that he was like everybody's little brother, right?
Yeah, he was. And when I mean little, I mean little. He was a short little fucker too, man. But he was always there for you when you needed it.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh God.
Hey man.
Good shit.
Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being part of the group, and thank you for your service. And
thank you.
Yeah, man. Shoot him in the face.
And twice in the chest.
All right, brother. Talk to you later.
Later.